Welcome to Yoga is Science, the podcast where Western medicine meets Eastern philosophy. I'm Colynn Vosburgh, a former emergency room nurse and medical student turned full-time yoga teacher. With over 200 teacher trainings taught, I've come to understand how yoga really is the original science of life. And I'd love you to join me as we explore the profound ways that ancient wisdom and modern science intersect to support healing, growth, and transformation. Let's dive in. All right. So let's talk about pranayama. We've talked about all of the things. This is the fourth limb of the 8-limb yoga path, right? We know yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. Interestingly enough, we already talked about yama, right? Yama is the first limb of yoga, and yama carries with it basically 5 of the 10 commandments of yoga. So we would call these first 5 things like restraints. So if yama translates to restraints in your behavior, then pranayama is being translated into restraint of the breath. Now, we've already also talked about pranayama. Prana means life force. 10,000 years ago, without a microscope, without a medical degree, without understanding of the biology of the body, then we can say prana is breath, but prana really isn't breath. Prana is so much more. And if you're standing back and you're looking at a person and you know that there's something that keeps them alive, but it's not their soul, because the soul never dies, but the body does, then what we find out right off the bat is that prana being life force means if this person, the first thing they find out is like, if this person isn't breathing, they die. So they get prana from their breath or with their breath, right? And so that, what do we get when we breathe? The oxygen molecule. This is, remember, 10,000 years ago, they don't know about the oxygen molecule. They just know that when you breathe, that's part of being alive. So then we also know, if we go further, but we have already done this and gone through this, is that if your heart stops beating, then you die. So we know that that has something to do with like water circulating in the body, which actually delivers oxygen to the tissues. And then next, if you don't have food, which are nutrients, which help the cells to deliver oxygen to the other cells, then you die. And then we also know that if you don't get sunlight, a building block, like a vitamin building block, then you die. So first and foremost, we know that you can't go longer than 3 minutes without air, right? I mean, sure you can, but we're talking about in general. So if someone is witnessing this, then they know, first and foremost, the most important part of your life force comes through your breath. Because you can go 3 days without water, you can go 3 weeks without food, and you can go like years without vitamin D, even though you won't have a great quality of life, right? It's in that order. So what we know is there's a restraint, an expansion, or a control of the breath. Pranayama. So what this does right off the bat is it differentiates the difference between pranayama and kriyas. So if you go to a class and someone's like breathing really fast, that's not a pranayama, because we already know that pranayama has to do with our breath, and it has to do with a restraint or an expansion or a control. And if we read the sutras, there's very few sutras for asana and there's very few sutras for pranayama. But and the sutras are like kind of like the Bible to yoga, we could say. So when we dive into that, then we see that the sutras tell us that a pranayama is defined by a pause, between either the inhale and the exhale or the exhale and the inhale. So that means that there's some kind of restraint. When you're moving really quick, that's a detoxifying method, and that's called a kriya. So as a yoga teacher, it's really important to know the difference between those things. Okay, pranayama versus kriyas, way different. And we know all the way back when we start looking at the texts. One of them is called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, but also the Upanishads and the Vedas, they talk about the breath. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika specifically says that improper practice of pranayama generates disease. There's a really great book by, I think his name's James Nestor, and it's called The Art of Breath, and it's like a 6-hour book on Audible, and it's actually quite helpful because it goes through the years and the generations, the cultures and the religions, and what they say about our breath. I mean, clearly breathing is the most important thing that you do, period. Well, what I know about the human body is that first and foremost, try this for yourself. So as you're seated, lean forward, slump your shoulders, roll your shoulders forward, like really sit forward. And now take a really deep breath in and let it out. Okay, now sit up nice and tall, roll your shoulders down your spine, crown of the head reaching up towards the ceiling, take a deep breath in. And then let it out. Way bigger, way more expansion, because the breath is not just the lungs, it has to do with the diaphragm, which also is kind of like our belly. So we need this freedom to breathe in order to breathe deeper, in order to breathe fuller, which is actually breathing slower. So when we're practicing a pranayama, we breathe deeper and less frequently. And in old age, like if you go to the hospital and you're there for quite some time, they'll give you something called the incentive spirometer. And basically it's like a little contraption that you breathe into and you get the ball to kind of like sit within the happy face. And so if you just like as quick as you can, it won't work. And if you like blow out, it's more about like a steady, even breath. It's more about an ujjayi or an abdominal breath. And that's really important because the way the lungs are set up is that whatever you don't use, you actually lose and you can't get it back. So you have your inhale and it goes into the trachea, and then it goes into a tube called the bronchus, and then that divides into 2 bronchi, and then those divide times 10 into different bronchial tubes, and then eventually bronchioles, which are microscopic. And at the end of the bronchioles are sacs, like clusters of grapes. And that's where the gas exchange takes place. So when you smoke or you don't breathe deep enough, what happens is these things they will shrivel up and they'll stop working. So no gas exchange takes place in that. When you vape, they will overinflate. And when they are overinflated, they stay that way. So you could call that popcorn lung, right? The in between with pressures and all of these like fancy science stuff is that we have a pressure that keeps it that it expands but not fully, and then it deflates but not fully. If either of those fulls are met, that part of the lungs don't work anymore. So imagine the lower lungs, which also extend into the back, funny enough. If we're not breathing to those areas, they actually just stop working. And then the clinical name for this is dead space. And basically what it is it's like areas of the lungs where there's no gas exchange. So think about it, it's warm, dark, and moist. And what we know is that bacteria loves that. So if you accidentally take anything into your lungs that are supposed to go into your stomach, that is definitely going to make you sick. It's going to become a pneumonia in there. So as we age, what happens is our muscles start to atrophy. That happens at 30 years of age. So even the small muscles that keep us sitting up tall, they start to like die off if we're not paying attention to them. And we automatically start to lean forward. And then in our body, the cartilage isn't so bouncy and rubbery anymore. So it starts to break off and it starts to compact and we lose size, like tallness. And so that also starts to look like this. We get a little bit of a humpback. And so now you're naturally like this. So how are you going to breathe deep? You're not. Usually we're just breathing enough to keep us alive. So yoga actually changes that for all of us because what it does is brings us to a place to focus on our breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. Like just taking that moment within that time, you would have actually breathed way more. So we take 12 to 20 breaths automatically every minute. The ideal breath is 6 per minute. So if people normally breathe low end 12 breaths per minute, it's half of that. So what I usually do as a practice is I have people sit and then we set the timer for 1 minute and then we count how many times you breathe in that moment. So here's the thing, it's already ruined because we're bringing attention to our breath. And when we bring attention to our breath, we slow it down. But I want you to breathe normal, okay? And I'm going to set the timer for 1 minute. And I want you to count your breath. Breathe as normal as you can. And go. Stop. So just notice how many breaths you had. I had 15. Now we're going to do it again for the ideal amount of times you're supposed to breathe. So we're going to take one breath. It should be like 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. Okay, so I'm going to guide you through it. So roll your shoulders down your spine, sit up nice and tall, and take a deep breath in. 2, 3, 4, 5, and exhale out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale in. 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale in. 5. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Last one. Inhale. Exhale. And stop. So that's how we're kind of supposed to breathe for maximum efficiency for the body. It saves energy and we actually breathe deeper. The other thing is, as a yoga teacher in class, when you start telling people how many breaths to count, that's a big no-no for me because Another practice that I do is I make everybody sit in a circle and then I say, okay, take 5 breaths and put your hand up, close your eyes, take 5 breaths, put your hand up when you've taken your 5 breaths, and then look at the group. Other than that, keep your eyes closed, don't look at the group. And so then that's what happens is some people take some really quick breaths. I take like the slowest, most maximum time that I possibly can because I know how beneficial it is to practice yoga and to breathe deeply. So of course I'm the last one and I've taken like, like 8 minutes to take 5 breaths. And then now we know how unfair it is to tell people to take 5 breaths because nobody breathes at the same rate. And to me, you cannot hold safe space for someone if you're not including them. So instead of guiding anybody to how many breaths to take, literally use the cue, breathe. And that's it. That means people are going to breathe in that moment. So pranayama is best supported with the use of your bandhas. Okay. Bandhas mean like locks, and they help you to maintain your posture for maximum inspiration and expiration. There's 3 main bandhas. We have Mula Bandha, which is your pelvic floor or your root lock. We have Uddiyana Bandha, which is your core or your abdomen. And then we have Jalandhara Bandha, which is your throat lock. When all 3 are locked together, this is called Mahabandha. And when we do this, the prana will go to Brahma Nadi. Now, Sushumna. We have not gotten into that. That's something we look at the nadis and Sushumna a little bit more actually in the chakras. But really, the nadis are known as like rivers or tubes that flow through your body. In science, these rivers or tubes are your cardiovascular and respiratory system and your nervous system, really, because that's where the energy goes through. And Brahma Nadi or Sushumna being like the main nadi, it's like Brahma is the creator, so it's the creator nadi. When you're in utero, what's the first thing that's formed after like the physical outer body is being kind of made? Your spine, your spinal cord, your brain. So when you breathe like this, all of your breath will go to your spinal cord. So let's practice it. Mula Bandha is really like like here's how I explain it in class. I imagine like I tell the difference between like a light like kind of like lifting up of the pelvic floor and then a squeezing, which is also like your Kegels, or I call it weird butt. When you really squeeze, if you look at me from behind, you have a weird butt, right? So we want somewhere in between that. We don't need you pulling in as tightly as possible. It's more like imagine you're in freezing cold water and you're walking into it, you're stepping into it, and it's going up your legs and up your thighs, and then you're about to put your pelvic area in the water, and there's a little like boop that happens. So I always call it a boop. So imagine that you lift your pelvic floor with a boop, not a weird butt, if this makes sense to you. So do that, and then pull the belly button in towards the spine and lift your chest up while also pulling the ribs towards one another. So you're engaging your abs. And then Jalandhara Bandha is your throat lock. So it's where your ears are over your shoulders and your chin is parallel to the ground. And there's a little bit of tension in the neck to hold you in that space instead of looking up or looking down. It's like right in the center. Now keep that and take a deep breath in and let it out. This is most beneficial for your breath. So prana, the concept of prana comes way back 5,000 years ago in the Upanishads. And the texts actually say that enlightenment is found through a combination of breath retention practices and concentration on the sacred sound Om. because this directs all of the prana to Sushumna. So remember, energetically, Sushumna is where, your Kundalini energy is. And so this is going to help you awaken your Kundalini. This is going to help you to remember like who you truly are. Patanjali talks about purification through asana, pranayama, and meditation. And the Hatha Yoga Pradipika offers instructions on how to complete alternate nostril breathing and retaining the breath. So these practices are not new. These are practices from many, many years ago. And there's some issues with current yoga teachings, like using empty, non-present cues in class. That example is like what I was talking about. Take 5 breaths here. Okay, inhale, lift your right leg up into the air. Like, in no way did you give me enough time to actually breathe. So you're not being present. And then telling people that they need to breathe more. That's not true. We don't need to breathe more. We need the opposite. We need to breathe deeper, which means we need to breathe less. So what we're actually doing is breathing deeper and being more present. That's what the breath offers. So I'm going to offer you some things that can help you when you're teaching pranayama. It's very, very beneficial. First and foremost, the very first technique is breath awareness, or something called conscious breath. It's literally just being aware of your breath. You encourage someone to sit and to breathe. And you can bring mindfulness into this, in which you're focusing on how the oxygen or the air goes into the nose, what side you can feel it on, more on the septum or the nares, like follow the path of the breath in, feel the expansion, release, feel the air come out. This is helpful just to be aware and calm us down. The next technique is called abdominal breathing. Now, anytime we do any kind of breathing, you can start to feel dizzy, especially when we slow it down, because what we're doing is we're pulling in more breath and we're pulling in more oxygen than we're used to when we breathe normally and unconsciously. So that means there's a rush of oxygen to the brain, which actually we can feel super dizzy with. So if you feel that, keep breathing or stop, take a break, and then return back to it. And abdominal breathing is filling the belly up like a balloon. Imagine that when you breathe in, your belly expands out like a balloon. And then when you breathe out, your belly comes back in towards the body and all of the air leaves your body or your lungs. So try it. Inhale, fill up your belly. Exhale, pull the belly button in, release all of the air from the body. So abdominal breathing is really just helping someone to expand the belly, because normally, what are we taught? Pull the belly button in. And now try and take a deep breath. So you'll feel it all up in the chest. Let it out. Okay, now stop it and expand the belly. So notice there's space in the belly and then there's space in the chest. So you're going to take a deeper breath that way and then let it out. Belly button in, breathe from the chest. So what we're doing is we're counteracting the common technique of holding the belly in to appear skinnier. And we're actually filling up the belly, pushing it out as far as you possibly can, taking in the deepest breath ever, and then exhaling. So, nervous system, right? We're constantly in chronic fight or flight. We're like always in danger because of the financial system. And so we're used to a higher blood pressure. We're used to constantly like secreting glucose in our body. We're breathing faster, our heart's beating faster because we're stressed out. And what abdominal breathing does is it signals via the vagus nerve, the nervous system, that we're not in danger. So when you're breathing normal, you stay stressed. when you abdominal breathe, you start to invite the diaphragm into your breathing. And there's a hole in the diaphragm. It's almost like an umbrella that opens up and closes to help you breathe. And it's just under your lungs and it's just above, like your belly. And so when you breathe in, long, slow, deep. And then when you breathe out, long, slow, deep, what you're doing is massaging the vagus nerve that goes through a hole in the diaphragm. And when you massage the vagus nerve, it actually tones it so that it will quicken up with its response to take you out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. Here's the thing, when you're constantly stressed, you're not really ever relaxing. So your vagus nerve is like useless, kind of. It's not really needed. So to go from stressed or anxious into chill, it takes a long time. When you have like a strong reflex to chill the F out, that means your vagus nerve is toned. And so one of the ways that you can start toning it is abdominal breathing. This is why deep breathing helps people stop stressing out. Hopefully you understand that. And so you either understand that for your own stress or for your students' stress. And then the third technique is 3-part yogic breath. It's also known as Durga Pranayama. Durga means 3 in Sanskrit. This is not the Durga goddess. It's Drigha, I believe. Could be a little off on the spelling. But it means 3-part breath. And so 3-part breath, after you've become aware of your breath, and then you've spent a little bit of time abdominal breathing, the idea is you'll breathe in, fill up the belly, then you'll breathe into the ribs, expand the ribs, then you breathe into the chest expands, collarbones come up towards the ceiling. This isn't super dramatic. You're not like, right? It's just, let's do it together. Inhale, fill up the belly. Fill up the ribs, expand the ribs away from one another. Now take the last of the air up into the chest and feel the chest expand, collarbones up towards the ceiling. Opposite, release, collarbones come back down, ribs come in towards one another, belly button comes in towards the spine. Do it again. Inhale, fill up your belly, fill up your ribs, fill up your chest. Exhale from your chest, from your ribs, pull the belly button in towards the spine. One more time. Inhale, fill up your belly, fill up your ribs, fill up your chest. Exhale from your chest, from your ribs, from your belly, and then return to normal breathing. Automatically, your breath was going to be slower, deeper, your heart rate slowed down, your blood pressure went down. This just happened from us breathing. Now, if you're going to teach any other techniques, this foundational breath is your 3-part yogic breath. That's it. You don't want to teach Nadi Shodhana, like alternate nostril breathing, without having the 3-part down, because now you're just kind of half breathing. You're not like fully breathing. So don't move past these 3 techniques until you have them down. And then the next thing to offer is Ujjayi. And Ujjayi is basically technique 3, but we're slowing it down even more. And that Ujjayi is the pace of your vinyasa class. That Ujjayi is what helps you to move through hard poses in Hatha. That Ujjayi is what helps calm your nervous system in Yin. And that Ujjayi is what helps to repair your nervous system and therefore your body in restorative practice. These are foundational breaths that you have to have down in yoga to experience a higher quality of life. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. So let's practice Ujjayi, and then that's where I'm going to leave you. So 3-part breath, great. You got that down. I would start any like pranayama with these 3 techniques together. Breath awareness, then abdominal breathing, then 3-part breath. Now keep the 3-part breath. And here's how you do, alternative nostril breathing, or here's how you do Brahmari breath, or here's how you do this breath or that breath. But like, you have to have these down. Otherwise, you're just actually like making things worse. In Indian culture, in yogic culture, there is an idea that you were born with the amount of breaths you're going to breathe and then you die. So whenever you breathe them is when you die. So if you spend a lot of time breathing fast and being unconscious to your breath, you're going to die earlier than you need to. And to be honest, this is actually science. It's true. So if you breathe deeper, not only will you have a higher quality of life because you will be healthier, you will also live longer. And though we may not talk in science about you're born with as many breaths as you're going to get, it's just up to you when you're going to use them. This is backed by science that deeper breathing is healthier for you. And we just explained why. As people get older, they start to shrink and hunch, and then they can't breathe deeply, and then they lose portions of their lung, and now they're more prone to pneumonia as they age. And that pneumonia is probably going to kill them one day if something else doesn't. And if breath is the number one reason why you're alive, it is your life force, then why wouldn't we be spending more time and energy on it? So Ujjayi is just a little bit different because we put a restriction in the throat. So I want you to do this. I want you to take your right hand and put it in front of your mouth. And you may have done this a million times, but I really want you to just be present with it. Okay. Experience is how we actually teach other people because we experience it. So now we know what it feels like in our body, which embodies the techniques. And now we can teach people from a place of understanding instead of just teaching. My teacher taught me how to teach you how to alternate nostril breathe. So here's how you do it. Close this one, open this one, close this one, open this one. Ujjayi, hand in front of your mouth. I want you to take a deep breath in and then blow on your hand like you're trying to fog a mirror or a window. Keep doing this. As you do that, close your eyes and feel what's happening in your throat. Do you feel that? That's Jalandhara Bandha. That's a restriction in your throat. And what it does when you're practicing 3-part breath is it slows down your breath. Okay, now that you've done that, inhale the same way. It's like you're Darth Vader. Luke, I am your father. So keep that restriction on the inhale and the exhale and close your mouth. And do your 3-part breath. Okay, so inhale, restriction in the throat. Inhale to the belly, to the ribs, to the chest, and then exhale, keeping the restriction from the chest and the ribs and the belly. And take another round. Inhale. Notice how the restriction really slows down the breath. So you're breathing to all areas of the lungs and you're doing it really slow. This helps with your cardiovascular health, as well as it's still diaphragmatic breathing. So it is toning the vagus nerve, which is helping you stay out of the stress response. This is life-changing stuff. If you're a teacher and you don't know this, you're actually just making things worse. You're not actually practicing pranayama because pranayama has expansion and restraint in it. And now that's landscape for all of the other pranayama techniques. So I feel like that's a good place to stop. And you have homework, and your homework is to take some time out of every day to practice this breathing yourself. Set a timer, 5 minutes, and do this. It'll change your life. I promise you, it'll change your life. It helps you to feel better in your body. It helps with injury. It helps with tension. And both of these things are like cause us issues, right? Tension is from stress and it causes injury. So if you breathe deeper, your life will change. Thank you for joining me on Yoga is Science. I hope today's episode offered you a fresh perspective on the incredible synergy between the ancient yogic practices and our modern day science. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who could benefit from these insights. And until next time, keep exploring the science of life.